Most people fear being alone more than they fear becoming someone they no longer recognize. They will stay in unhealthy relationships, tolerate disrespect, follow the crowd, and silence their own beliefs simply to avoid the uncomfortable feeling of solitude. Society has taught us that being surrounded by people is a sign of success, while being alone is a sign of failure. But history and human psychology reveal a very different truth. The greatest transformations rarely happen in crowded rooms. They happen in silence, in isolation, and in those difficult moments when you are forced to confront yourself without distractions. If you are alone while building your character, you may not be falling behind. You may be doing exactly what is necessary. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. Loneliness is the painful feeling that something important is missing. Solitude, however, is a conscious decision to use your own company as a place of growth. One weakens the spirit, while the other strengthens it. Many people confuse these two experiences because they have never learned how to be comfortable with themselves. The moment silence enters their lives, they immediately search for noise. They reach for their phones, seek constant conversations, or surround themselves with people. Not because those connections are meaningful, but because they are afraid of hearing their own thoughts. Yet every great builder, strategist, artist, philosopher, and leader has understood one timeless principle. Solitude creates clarity. When you remove yourself from constant opinions, endless comparisons, and the pressure to impress others, your mind begins to think independently. You stop asking what everyone else expects from you and begin asking what you truly want from your own life. That question is uncomfortable because it demands honesty. But it is also the question that separates ordinary lives from extraordinary ones. Think about a sword being forged. It is not shaped in comfort. It is placed into intense heat, hammered repeatedly, and refined through pressure. Human character develops in much the same way. Difficult seasons often isolate you, not to destroy you, but to strengthen qualities that comfort could never create. Patience grows when there is no immediate reward. Discipline grows when no one is watching. Confidence grows when you learn to rely on your own judgment instead of constant encouragement. These qualities cannot be borrowed from a crowd. They are built in moments when you stand alone. One of the greatest advantages of solitude is that it removes distraction. When you are constantly surrounded by people, it becomes easy to live according to their expectations. Their opinions begin shaping your decisions. Their fears become your fears. Their limits quietly become your limits. Without realizing it, you start living a life designed by other people's approval instead of your own purpose. Solitude interrupts that pattern. It gives you the space to hear your own voice instead of the endless noise around you. This is why many people experience their greatest personal growth after seasons of separation. They begin reading instead of endlessly scrolling. They learn new skills instead of chasing temporary validation. They strengthen their bodies, sharpen their minds, and develop habits that would have been impossible if every hour had been spent seeking acceptance. At first, the process feels uncomfortable because growth always demands sacrifice. But slowly, the silence that once felt empty begins feeling peaceful. You realize that your own company is not something to escape from. It is something to strengthen. There is another psychological truth hidden within solitude. It reveals your relationship with yourself. When no one is applauding you, do you still work hard? When no one is encouraging you, do you continue moving forward? When there is no audience, do you remain faithful to your principles? These questions cannot be answered in public. They can only be answered when you are alone. Character is never measured by how you perform before others. It is measured by what you repeatedly choose when nobody is watching. Of course, this does not mean you should reject relationships or isolate yourself from the world. Human connection is valuable, and meaningful friendships are an important part of life. The lesson is different. Never fear temporary solitude if it is helping you become stronger, wiser, and more disciplined. Some seasons require fewer voices, so your own purpose can become louder. Some paths become clearer only after the crowd disappears. Remember that many people will misunderstand your solitude. They may assume you are failing because they cannot see the quiet work taking place beneath the surface. Let them think what they will. Seeds also grow in darkness before they ever break through the ground. Real transformation is often invisible until the results become impossible to ignore. Because sometimes the greatest sign that you are moving toward your purpose is not that everyone is walking beside you, but that you have become strong enough to keep walking even when you are alone. Once you understand that solitude can strengthen your character instead of weakening it, you begin seeing another truth that most people never question. The crowd is not always leading toward wisdom. In many cases, it is simply moving toward comfort. Human beings have always possessed a powerful desire to belong. From an early age, we are taught to fit in, agree with the majority, and avoid standing apart. While cooperation is valuable, blind conformity carries a hidden cost. The moment you stop thinking for yourself and begin living only to satisfy the expectations of the crowd, you slowly surrender the very thing that makes you unique, your independent judgment. Throughout history, nearly every meaningful breakthrough began with someone who was willing to stand apart. New ideas were often rejected before they were respected. Visionaries were criticized before they were celebrated. Innovators were doubted before they were admired. This pattern exists because people naturally resist what challenges their familiar way of thinking. The crowd prefers certainty, even when that certainty limits growth. It rewards comfort because comfort feels safe. But greatness has never been built by following the safest path. One of the greatest psychological traps is the fear of social rejection. Many people remain silent even when they know something is wrong. They hide their ambitions because they fear being laughed at. They abandon their dreams because friends or family fail to understand them. They accept average standards because everyone around them calls those standards normal. Without realizing it, they begin measuring their lives by public approval instead of personal conviction. Independent thinking requires courage because it often leads to temporary isolation. The moment you choose a different direction, some people will question your decisions. Others may criticize your choices simply because they cannot imagine living differently themselves. Their criticism is not always based on truth. Often, it reflects their own fears more than your reality. People tend to defend the life they already know, and anything that challenges it can make them uncomfortable. This is why emotionally strong individuals develop the ability to listen without becoming controlled. They value advice, but they do not surrender their judgment. They remain open to learning, yet they carefully examine every opinion before accepting it as truth. They understand that popularity is not the same as wisdom. An idea supported by many people is not automatically correct, just as an unpopular path is not automatically wrong. The quality of a decision depends on its principles, not on the number of people who agree with it. Solitude plays an important role in developing this mindset. When you spend time alone, away from constant opinions and distractions, your own thinking begins to sharpen. You learn to ask difficult questions. What do I truly believe? What kind of life do I actually want? Am I making this decision because it reflects my values, or because I am afraid of standing out? These questions cannot be answered honestly while your attention is constantly absorbed by the voices of others. Another reason the crowd often rewards comfort is because change demands responsibility. Following everyone else allows people to avoid accountability. If the majority is wrong, they can simply say they were doing what everyone else was doing. But independent thinkers accept responsibility for their own choices. They understand that freedom and accountability always exist together. They are willing to make difficult decisions because they know that personal growth requires personal ownership. This does not mean rejecting society or believing that every popular opinion is false. Wisdom is not found in opposing the crowd simply for the sake of being different. Real wisdom comes from thinking carefully before choosing your direction. Sometimes your path will align with others. Sometimes it will not. The important thing is that your decisions are guided by reason, character, and purpose, rather than by fear of rejection. As you continue developing this discipline, something remarkable begins to happen. You become less concerned with fitting in and more focused on becoming the person you were meant to be. You stop comparing your timeline with everyone else's. You no longer feel pressured to imitate lives that do not reflect your own values. Instead, you quietly continue building your future according to your own principles, even if very few people understand it today. Remember, the crowd may offer comfort, but comfort rarely produces greatness. Growth often begins the moment you are willing to stand alone with your convictions, while others continue following familiar paths. Because the people who change their lives are rarely those who follow the crowd. They are the ones who have the courage to think beyond it. After learning to think independently, instead of blindly following the crowd, you arrive at another lesson that separates ordinary people from those who quietly build extraordinary lives. Not every dream should be announced the moment it is born. Not every goal needs an audience. In fact, one of the greatest mistakes people make is revealing their vision before it has developed enough strength to survive criticism. There is immense psychological power in learning to work quietly. Silence protects your vision while discipline turns it into reality. Human beings naturally seek validation. The moment an exciting idea enters their mind, they feel an overwhelming urge to tell someone. They announce the business they plan to build, the book they intend to write, the career they hope to pursue, or the habits they are about to develop. They imagine that sharing these plans will increase their motivation. Sometimes it does, but only for a moment. More often, it replaces action with temporary satisfaction. The excitement of talking about success begins to feel like success itself, even though nothing has actually been accomplished. There is another danger that many people never consider. Every dream begins in a fragile state. Like a young tree, it requires protection before it can withstand strong winds. When you expose your vision too early, you also expose it to doubt, criticism, jealousy, and unnecessary opinions. Some people may discourage you because they genuinely believe your goal is unrealistic. Others may criticize simply because your ambition reminds them of the dreams they abandoned. Their words may not be malicious, but if your confidence is still developing, they can quietly weaken your belief before your journey has truly begun. This is why wise and strategic individuals often choose silence over premature celebration. They understand that a vision becomes stronger through consistent work, not constant discussion. Instead of talking endlessly about what they will achieve, they wake up each day and take another step forward. They allow discipline to replace excitement. While others are busy announcing their intentions, they are quietly creating results. Think about a seed planted beneath the soil. It spends weeks growing where no one can see it. During that time, it does not demand attention or recognition. It silently develops roots strong enough to support future growth. If someone dug it up every day just to prove it was growing, it would never become a tree. Human ambition follows the same principle. Some of the most important work in your life will happen long before anyone else notices it. This also teaches patience, a quality that has become increasingly rare in a world driven by instant recognition. Many people want applause before they have earned it. They want admiration before they have mastered their craft. They want attention before they have built anything meaningful. But lasting success is rarely immediate. It is built through countless unseen hours of effort, repetition, failure, and improvement. Those quiet moments become the invisible foundation beneath every visible achievement. Another psychological advantage of silence is that it keeps your focus where it belongs. The more people know about your plans, the more you may feel pressured to perform for them instead of remaining faithful to your own purpose. You begin thinking about their expectations rather than your own progress. Quiet work removes that pressure. It allows you to make mistakes, adjust your strategy, and improve without feeling the need to constantly defend your journey. There is also wisdom in allowing your achievements to introduce you instead of your promises. Anyone can describe the person they hope to become. Anyone can make impressive announcements about the future. But only disciplined individuals quietly transform those words into reality. When your actions consistently match your intentions, you no longer need to convince people of your ability. Your results speak with a confidence that words can never equal. This does not mean you should never share your dreams. Trusted mentors, loyal friends, and people who genuinely support your growth can provide valuable guidance and encouragement. The lesson is to be selective. Share your vision with those who strengthen your purpose, not with everyone seeking conversation. Protect your goals until they have become strong enough to stand on their own. As your character continues to develop, you will discover that silence is not weakness, it is strategic patience. Every quiet hour spent improving yourself is an investment that the world cannot yet see. While others compete for recognition, you are building something that recognition alone could never create. And when the time finally comes, you will not need long explanations or dramatic announcements. Your work will tell the story for you. Because the strongest visions are never built through endless promises. They are built in silence until success becomes impossible to ignore. After learning to protect your vision through silence and disciplined action, you eventually reach a stage where there is nowhere left to hide. The distractions fade. The opinions of the crowd grow quieter. Your plans are no longer competing for attention. In that stillness, you meet the one person you can never escape: yourself. This is why solitude is so powerful. It does not merely separate you from other people. It reveals who you truly are. Many people spend their entire lives staying busy, not because they are productive, but because they are avoiding self-reflection. Every free moment is filled with noise. There is always another notification, another conversation, another video, another distraction waiting to occupy the mind. At first, this seems harmless, but over time, constant distraction becomes a shield that prevents you from confronting your own fears, weaknesses, and unanswered questions. The moment silence appears, discomfort follows, because silence removes every excuse for avoiding yourself. This is why loneliness feels painful for so many people. It exposes habits they have ignored, insecurities they have hidden, and emotions they have never learned to understand. When there is no one else to blame, entertain, or impress, the truth becomes impossible to avoid. You begin asking difficult questions. Why do I seek approval so desperately? Why do I fear rejection? What kind of person am I becoming? Am I living according to my values or simply reacting to other people's expectations? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are also the beginning of wisdom. Human psychology often encourages us to judge ourselves by comparison. We compare our success, appearance, relationships, and achievements with everyone around us. Yet comparison rarely produces clarity. It produces anxiety. Solitude breaks this habit because there is no audience to compete with. The only comparison that remains is between the person you were yesterday and the person you are becoming today. That shift changes everything. Growth stops being a competition with others and becomes a commitment to your own character. One of the greatest gifts of solitude is self-awareness. It allows you to recognize patterns that would otherwise remain hidden. Perhaps you notice that you become defensive whenever someone offers criticism. Perhaps you realize that procrastination has become a way of escaping fear. Perhaps you discover that many of your goals were never truly yours but were borrowed from society's expectations. These discoveries can be difficult, but they are incredibly valuable. You cannot improve what you refuse to acknowledge. Honest awareness is the first step toward lasting transformation. This process also teaches emotional responsibility. Instead of blaming circumstances or other people for every disappointment, you begin asking what you can control. You recognize that while you cannot choose every event that happens in life, you can always choose your response. This realization creates freedom. It shifts your attention away from complaining about the world and toward improving yourself. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to strengthen patience, discipline, resilience, and wisdom. Many people fear looking inward because they believe they will only find flaws. But self-reflection is not about self-condemnation. It is about understanding yourself honestly enough to grow. A wise person does not deny their weaknesses, nor do they allow those weaknesses to define them. They identify them, learn from them, and gradually replace destructive habits with stronger ones. Every moment of honest reflection becomes another step towards self-mastery. There is also a remarkable confidence that develops when you truly know yourself. You become less affected by praise because you understand your strengths without needing constant reminders. You become less shaken by criticism because you are already aware of the areas you are improving. Your identity is no longer built upon changing opinions. It is built upon an honest relationship with yourself. This quiet confidence cannot be manufactured because it is rooted in truth rather than appearance. Of course, self-awareness is not achieved in a single moment. It is a lifelong practice. There will always be new lessons, new challenges, and new parts of yourself waiting to be understood. The goal is not perfection, but progress. Every season of solitude offers another opportunity to refine your character and strengthen your purpose. What once felt like isolation gradually becomes one of your greatest teachers. As you continue walking this path, remember that being alone is not something to fear. It is often the place where illusions disappear, excuses lose their power, and your true character begins to emerge. The world may see only your achievements, but you will know they were built upon countless quiet moments when you chose honesty over comfort and growth over distraction. Because the person who is willing to face themselves in solitude becomes someone the world can no longer shake. By now, you have discovered that solitude strengthens your mind, independent thinking separates you from the crowd, silence protects your vision, and self-reflection reveals your true character. These lessons naturally lead to one of the most important principles of personal power. Dependence makes you easy to control. The more your happiness, confidence, security, or identity depends entirely on other people, the more influence they gain over your decisions. True freedom begins the moment you become capable of standing on your own. Human psychology has always understood a simple reality. Whoever controls your greatest need controls your behavior. If you desperately need approval, people can manipulate you with praise or rejection. If you desperately need companionship, you may tolerate disrespect just to avoid being alone. If you desperately need financial support without building your own independence, you may sacrifice your values to protect your comfort. Dependence quietly replaces freedom with fear. Every decision becomes centered on what you might lose rather than on what is right. This does not mean that relationships, friendship, or cooperation are weaknesses. Human beings were never meant to live without meaningful connections. The danger appears when those connections become the foundation of your identity instead of a valuable part of your life. A healthy relationship is built between two whole people who choose each other. An unhealthy relationship often develops when one person believes they cannot survive without the other. That belief creates emotional imbalance, and emotional imbalance invites manipulation. Look closely at the people who remain calm during difficult situations. They are usually the ones who have developed self-reliance. They know how to solve problems without immediately expecting someone else to rescue them. They have learned valuable skills. They take responsibility for their decisions. They understand that while support from others is a blessing, it should never become the only source of strength. This quiet independence gives them confidence because they know they can face uncertainty without falling apart. Many people remain trapped in situations that slowly destroy their peace simply because they fear losing what feels familiar. They stay in toxic friendships because they fear loneliness. They remain in unhealthy relationships because they fear starting over. They silence their opinions because they fear rejection. Every choice is driven by dependence instead of conviction. Over time, they begin living according to someone else's expectations rather than their own principles. Solitude becomes a powerful teacher because it breaks this cycle. When you spend meaningful time alone, you slowly realize that your happiness does not disappear simply because no one is constantly validating you. You begin discovering abilities you never knew you possessed. You solve problems independently. You make decisions without waiting for approval. You build routines that strengthen your body, sharpen your mind, and increase your discipline. Little by little, confidence grows. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become stronger. Another important lesson of self-reliance is learning to take full responsibility for your future. It is easy to blame circumstances, other people, or bad luck for every disappointment. But responsibility is where real power begins. The moment you accept that your habits, decisions, and daily actions shape your future, you stop waiting for someone else to change your life. Instead of asking, "Who will help me?" you begin asking, "What can I do today to improve myself?" That single shift transforms helplessness into purpose, financial independence, emotional maturity, intellectual curiosity, and disciplined habits all contribute to this freedom. They reduce the number of areas where fear can control your choices. When you know you can survive temporary setbacks, rejection becomes less frightening. Criticism becomes less painful. Failure becomes a lesson instead of a disaster. You no longer cling desperately to every opportunity because you trust your ability to create new ones. This mindset also changes the quality of your relationships. Ironically, the less you depend on people to complete you, the healthier your relationships become. You stop clinging. You stop controlling. You stop begging for attention. Instead, you appreciate others without surrendering yourself. Your connections become stronger because they are built on mutual respect rather than emotional necessity. You choose people because they enrich your life, not because you cannot imagine living without them. Of course, self-reliance does not mean refusing help or pretending you have all the answers. Wisdom includes knowing when to learn from others and when to accept support with gratitude. But there is a profound difference between accepting help and becoming helpless without it. One reflects humility. The other creates dependence. As you continue your journey, remember that every skill you develop, every challenge you overcome, and every difficult season you survive quietly strengthens your independence. The more capable you become, the less fear controls your decisions. You begin living according to principles instead of pressure, purpose instead of approval, and courage instead of comfort. Because the person who learns to stand alone is the person the world can no longer control. Everything you have learned throughout this journey now comes together into one final realization. Solitude is not the destination. It is the training ground. It has taught you to think independently, protect your vision, understand yourself, and become less dependent on the opinions and approval of others. All of these lessons prepare you for something far greater, becoming a person who cannot be easily manipulated. This is the highest form of personal power, because when your mind is disciplined and your identity is rooted within yourself, Very little in the outside world can control you. Most manipulation succeeds because it feeds on fear. People are controlled by the fear of rejection, the fear of loneliness, the fear of missing opportunities, the fear of criticism, or the fear of being misunderstood. Those fears push them into decisions they would never make if they truly trusted themselves. They remain silent when they should speak. They agree when they should disagree. They tolerate disrespect because they cannot imagine walking away. In every case, the manipulation works because the person believes they need something from others more than they need to remain faithful to themselves. But solitude changes that relationship with fear. When you have spent enough time alone building your character, you begin realizing that loneliness is temporary, but losing your integrity can last a lifetime. You discover that your peace does not depend on constant companionship. Your confidence no longer depends on applause. Your happiness is not determined by how many people agree with your choices. This inner stability quietly removes the leverage that many forms of manipulation depend upon. Consider the person who is comfortable eating alone, working alone, learning alone, and pursuing their purpose even when nobody is watching. Such a person becomes remarkably difficult to influence through social pressure. If someone threatens to withdraw approval, they remain calm because approval was never the foundation of their identity. If someone attempts to shame them for following a different path, they continue forward because they have already learned to value purpose over popularity. Their strength is not loud or dramatic, it is steady, and that steadiness commands respect. Human psychology naturally recognizes emotional stability. People trust individuals who remain composed during uncertainty. While others panic, they remain thoughtful. While others react impulsively, they pause before responding. While others chase every trend, they remain guided by principles that do not change with public opinion. This consistency creates quiet authority because it demonstrates that their decisions are rooted in conviction rather than emotion. Another remarkable quality of those who master solitude is patience. They understand that not every opportunity deserves an immediate response. They are not desperate for attention, validation, or instant success. They are willing to wait because they know lasting achievements require time. This patience protects them from manipulation by urgency. They are less likely to make poor decisions simply because someone pressures them to act quickly. Instead, they observe, reflect, and choose their path carefully. There is also tremendous freedom in no longer needing to impress everyone you meet. Imagine how much energy people waste trying to appear successful, intelligent, or important in the eyes of strangers. They shape their personalities according to changing expectations, hoping to receive acceptance from people who may never truly know them. But the person who has learned to enjoy their own company no longer carries this burden. They understand that respect earned by pretending to be someone else is never worth having. Authenticity becomes far more valuable than popularity. This does not mean becoming emotionally distant or refusing meaningful relationships. In fact, mastering solitude often improves your relationships because you enter them from a position of strength rather than need. You appreciate people without depending on them for your identity. You can love deeply without losing yourself. You can support others without abandoning your own purpose. Your connections become healthier because they are based on choice instead of fear. As you continue through life, there will always be moments when you find yourself walking alone. Friends may leave, circumstances may change, people may misunderstand your decisions. Do not interpret those moments as signs that you are failing. Sometimes they are evidence that you are growing beyond the expectations that once limited you. Every season of solitude gives you another opportunity to strengthen your mind, refine your character, and deepen your purpose. Remember, the goal has never been to avoid people. The goal has been to become so emotionally grounded that your peace cannot be purchased with approval or destroyed by rejection. When you reach that point, you discover a quiet confidence that no one can give you and no one can take away. You become free, not because life becomes easy, but because your strength no longer depends on circumstances. Because the person who has mastered solitude no longer fears standing alone, and that is the moment they become truly impossible to manipulate.